Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the 2018 Hack Summit. We're privileged here today to be with Rafael Cosman, who's the CTO and co-founder of Trust Token. And Trust Token is a platform for creating asset-backed tokens, which you can use to easily buy and sell around the world to actually map physical real-world assets to the blockchain. And there's a number of incredible investors that are backing Trust Token, and they really believe in them. And prior to Trust Token, Rafael has worked at several startups. He co-founded the nonprofit Street Code. He also worked for Google, Palantir, and a variety of other Silicon Valley startups. And he used to be a fellow for Lightspeed Ventures. He graduated from Stanford University with a bachelor's degree in computer science. And Rafael, it's such a privilege to have you here. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me on, Ed.
Great. So Rafael, why don't you start off by just getting our audience up to speed about you, maybe your background, how you got into programming, how you got into blockchain, what excites you about blockchain? Like, where did the genesis of all that happen?
Yeah, good question. So my background is mostly in engineering. I got into programming when I was very young. In fourth grade, I learned to code on do you remember the TI-84 basic graphing calculators?
Yes, I had one of those.
That's right. And I was just coding, games and like little programs to help with, like math problems. And then I went to Stanford to study computer science. And while I was there, I got interested in AI and also cryptography. And we had an amazing professor named Dan Boneh, who's considered one of the fathers of blockchain. And me and a couple other students started to get really interested in those kinds of topics. And I had a chance to work at Palantir doing AI research for crime prediction, and then later got recruited by Google Brain, which is Google's AI research group. And the idea for this company came out of a lot of late night conversations with my co-founders, who are good friends of mine. And we were looking at what was happening a couple of years back with Ethereum becoming a solid platform to be able to do decentralized computing on. And it looked like there were a lot of advantage for using platforms like Ethereum for trading assets. But there were trillions of dollars of assets in the real world that were nowhere near to being traded on a platform like Ethereum. The way that we trade currencies, commodities, equities, bonds today is very antiquated. And if you look at like what is the machinery, what's the process by which these assets are traded, it's quite inefficient. And so it looks to us like there would be a tremendous advantage from moving those assets on chain. But the actual asset to blockchain connection is a very difficult problem. And when we looked, we didn't see very many legitimate teams that were working on it. And so that's how we came up with the idea for Trust Token. And we set out on the mission to connect the $250 trillion worth of real-world assets to the blockchain. Now, when we started this, we knew we wanted to have a real product with real users early on. And so we thought, what is the asset that we could put into token form where we would have immediate adoption and be providing a lot of value to people? And so we started with US dollars. And so we recently launched our first product called TrueUSD about 4 months back. And TrueUSD is a stable coin that you can redeem 1-for-1 for US dollars. And it's a competitor to Tether, if you're familiar with that coin. So since we launched it, TrueUSD has been listed on some of the largest exchanges in the world. It has a market cap of over $80 million now, and is being traded by people all around the globe. And so we are focused on making that the best product we possibly can right now. But also we're building several more products, other currencies, and then later in this year we're going to be doing commodities like True Gold and True Silver. And then starting in 2019, we're looking to do tokens that are securities, such as bonds, equities, real estate, and other kinds of assets.
Very nice. Thank you, Rafael. And so tell us a little bit more about kind of the problem that Trust Token is trying to solve. So what problem exists in the world that gave rise to the creation of Trust Token?
Yeah. So the problem is the inefficiencies that we have today when trading all kinds of assets. And so if you even just look at, let's say, the US dollar, right? If I want to send you a dollar, like let's say I want to send you a $10,000 wire right now. Well, it's here on the West Coast, it's 2 p.m., which means that the banks are closed. And so if I want to send you a wire, the earliest you could possibly get it is tomorrow morning, right? And if I send you a wire on Friday evening, then the earliest you could get it is Monday morning. And that's pretty crazy. Like it's being able to transfer money is it's such an important, such a fundamental thing. And the idea that it goes down on evenings and weekends, it's how many other important technologies would you accept them having that kind of uptime, right? So with something like TrueUSD, you can take US dollars in token form, and you can send them anywhere around the world, and they will get there and they'll be settled in 20 seconds, and you'll pay 10 cents in fees. So that, it looks to me, is a way better way to be able to transact that particular asset, which is US dollars. But if you look at the barriers to transacting other kinds of assets, like let's say you wanted to sell to me 1 share of Google stock. The actual infrastructure, like the brokers and the dealers, if you actually look at the infrastructure that's needed and that's used just to make a single transfer of 1 stock from 1 company, it's unbelievably complex. You can spend hours and days and weeks reading Wikipedia pages about the infrastructure that underlies how just stock transfers works, and it's significantly different and equally complex for bonds, and real estate transfers are an entire another beast, right? So these trading and transacting and being able to buy and sell these kinds of assets is extremely complex today, and we have a technology with blockchains which can make it much easier and more trustworthy and more open as well. And the problem that we're solving is being able to bridge assets to the blockchain.
I see. And so tell us what some of the advantages are of tokenizing a real world asset. Like, let's say we embrace Trust Token and we use it for assets. Would we still use world? Would we just use electronic contracts on Trust Token? Like, what's your vision of the future, and what are some of the advantages of that vision?
Yeah, so we use a combination of both. Well, I mean, real world contracts are not going away anytime soon. And also for assets like TrueUSD, real world contracts play a very, very integral part of the stack, because it's a series of real world contracts that bind the underlying US dollars to the tokens. But once you connect the assets to the tokens, from there on up, you can just use smart contracts. And then you have a way of doing contracts which is much more open and transparent, where you can easily inspect. So someone can build assets on top of TrueUSD, like they can build derivatives and swaps and futures and all kinds of other derivative assets. And each one of those assets is fully inspectable, because you can see the code of the contract that is being used to assemble them. And as we connect more and more assets to the blockchain, like other currencies and commodities, then you can build even more complex and more interesting derivative assets. But unlike derivatives in the conventional legal world, which are oftentimes quite opaque, and where you could be a legal expert and a financial expert and still struggle to understand some of the derivative contracts and the way that they're moving around in the economy. But on blockchains, you have the ability to easily inspect any of these contracts and know for sure that it's going to do what it says it's going to do.
Very nice. And so if I have an asset in the real world, which I create a token that represents that asset on the blockchain, and I trade that token to someone else, and I engage in a smart contract with them, is that legally binding in terms of US law? Like, will the courts respect it? Will lawyers respect it? How legitimate is it?
Yeah, that's exactly the right question. It is legally binding. And let me explain exactly the sense in which it is. So let's say I have one TrueUSD, and I send that one TrueUSD to you. So from a legal perspective, there are US dollars. There's one US dollar which is backing every single TrueUSD. And those US dollars are held in a special escrow account, and they're governed by an escrow agreement. And that escrow agreement is a legal contract which specifically says that those dollars are being held on the behalf of the TrueUSD token holders, which means that when I have the one TrueUSD, there is $1 in that account, which, from the perspective of US law, is being held for me. And I can go and redeem my TrueUSDs for the underlying dollars. And if I transfer this TrueUSD to you, then you are now, those US dollars that were formerly being held on my behalf are now being held on your behalf, and you can go redeem them. And so that's the sense in which that's how US law perceives the TrueUSD tokens.
I see. So in summary, then, there's a custodian, which is an escrow agent who holds real dollars, and then there are these tokens on the blockchain, and the tokens can be traded, and the tokens represent rights to the dollars being held in those escrow accounts. Did we get that right?
Yep, you got that exactly right. And that escrow agent, they're a professional fiduciary, and they already manage billions of dollars of other people's money, and they're highly regulated and certified. And that's what makes them a very trustworthy fiduciary for holding these assets on the token holder's behalf.
So let's say I want to tokenize another asset, like a house or something. How is that accomplished in the real world? Is there an escrow agent and an escrow account for that too?
Yeah, it's a very similar process. So there would be the house would be put into a trust, and a trust it's a legal entity that is used for things like this, where you want to hold an asset on behalf of someone else. And then there would be a professional fiduciary that would act as the trustee of this trust. And then, let's say we tokenized, let's say a Manhattan rental property. So the income that's generated by this rental property would be distributed to all the token holders. And, that would be specified in the trust agreement. And so the fiduciary would be legally responsible to distribute that income appropriately. And then you could buy, let's say, 1/1,000,000th of this rental property, in token form, and then you'd receive 1/1,000,000th of the rental income, also paid out in TrueUSD or in another tokenized currency.
Well, that's interesting. So you can use this technology to almost like subdivide an asset into lots of little parts that people can benefit from.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I mean, we're even already doing that with TrueUSD and other currency products that we are starting to produce. And that's because TrueUSD, unlike the US dollar, is divisible to 18 decimal points. The US dollar is only divisible to 2, because why not? It's very easy to make things divisible to very, very very, very small scales once they're in token form. And so that enables applications like micropayments, where you could imagine paying a server a billionth of a penny for serving you a packet.
Makes sense. And tell us a little bit, for the developers in the audience, which is the majority of the audience here, I'm sure they'd love to learn about the architecture of your system. So what exactly have you guys created? What is the underlying system behind the hood, and how is that laid out and architected?
Yeah, great question. So there are a lot of different components here, and I can walk you through. So the main way that people interact with us is we have a web application where anyone can come and purchase and redeem TrueUSD. So you log in, you create an account, then you go through a KYC process, and then you can, let's say you want to buy 10,000 TrueUSDs, you'd send in a $10,000 wire, which would go into this escrow account that I mentioned, and then you would get 10,000 freshly minted TrueUSD. And then in this web app, you can also say you want to burn 10,000 TrueUSD, and then we'll send out $10,000 to you. And so that's how the number of TrueUSD in circulation and the number of US dollars in the bank account always stay matched 1-for-1. And so that's one piece of technology that we have here, is this web application for facilitating essentially the tokenization and detokenization of US dollars. And as we launch more products, such as other currencies and commodities, then this same web app is going to be used for all of those. So it's going to be a portal, potentially a major fiat to crypto on-ramp. And I can also do a demo of that at some point during this chat if it would be interesting.
Yeah, I think we'd like that. You can feel free to do that. Have you? Do you have that set up? Do you know how to share your screen and everything for that?
Yeah, I do. Let me share my screen and see if we can show you that. And then after...
An audience, feel free to start asking questions while Rafael sets this up. At the bottom of your screen, there's an Ask a Question button you can click. And we'll get to those audience questions after Rafael is in with his demo.
Okay, let me see if I can share this screen. Okay, can you see all right?
Yeah. Looks great.
Can you see my screen here?
Looks great.
Okay, so this is the TrueCoin web application. So, so this is the place where people purchase and redeem TrueUSD. So I'm going to create a new account. And so when I sign in, I'm going to be asked if I'm an individual or an organization. I'm going to show individual because the KYC process is a bit simpler. Okay, so first I'm going to go through this KYC process. Then once I get approved, then I'll be able to purchase and redeem TrueUSD. So there are kind of a lot of information here to fill out, so I'm just going to skip through this pretty quickly. You also have to verify your Ethereum address as part of this process. And so the way that you can think of it kind of like a bank test charge to prove that you own your Ethereum address. And the reason why we need to do this is because whenever we're minting TrueUSD for someone, we need to know that that's their wallet. And part of the reason we have to have such extensive KYC and AML, anti-money laundering procedures, is because there are, in crypto, anytime you make a new cryptocurrency, there are going to be people that are going to be trying to be using it for all kinds of nefarious purposes, money laundering, drug smuggling, etc. And so this is one of the protections that we have to make sure that it's extremely difficult if you want to be able to use TrueUSD for any sort of nefarious purpose. So you validate that you own your Ethereum address. Then once you fill out all that info, you can submit your info for verification. So here I'm going to click submit. Now usually this will take 3 to 5 business days before I'd be verified, but I'm just showing you kind of a demo here, so I'm going to have to be verified instantly. And so now I'm able to purchase and redeem TrueUSD. So I'm going to say I want to purchase TrueUSD. Let's say I want 1 million TrueUSD. So here it's giving me the wiring instructions to send in $1 million to get my TrueUSD, and there's a little fee here as well that's added on, and that's for processing the wire and also to pay the fiduciary fees. So once I send in my wire, then I'll get my TrueUSD minted, and it'll arrive in my Ethereum address. And then I can show you the process for redeeming TrueUSD as well. So here I fill in my bank account information, my bank address, and then here are instructions that I'm given for how to burn my TrueUSD on chain. And once those TrueUSD are burned from my address, then I'll get the corresponding number of US dollars coming out. And that makes sure that there's always the same number of TrueUSD in circulation as there are dollars in the account. So that's pretty much it.
Great, thanks. Go ahead and stop sharing your screen then. So this is very interesting. And so once you've got the capital in TrueUSD, what are people doing with it these days? Are they just holding it in that new meta form on the blockchain, or are they actually using it for a business purpose?
Yeah, well, people are using TrueUSD for a lot of different things. So one of the main things people use TrueUSD for right now is just trading on exchanges. And if on any given day, if Bitcoin is crashing, which happens pretty regularly, and all of the other volatile cryptocurrencies are oftentimes crashing as well because they're highly correlated. And so traders need something that's a stable coin to trade into. And right now there aren't very many options on the market. The biggest one is Tether, and Tether has a pretty bad reputation. And so TrueUSD is oftentimes by some traders seen as a more trustworthy alternative. So you can trade into TrueUSD if you think Bitcoin's going down, and then when you think Bitcoin's going back up, you can trade back into Bitcoin. And so that's one of the main uses. And TrueUSD does oftentimes 10 or sometimes $20 million of trading volume per day. And it's listed on Bittrex, which is the largest exchange in the United States, on Upbit, which is one of the largest exchanges in the world, on Binance, which is by some measures #1 in the world, as well as several others. I
see. And so, so if you were to look at TrueUSD and compare it to other stable coins like Tether or for example, some algorithmic ones like Basis, which we'll be presenting tomorrow, how do they all compare and how do you all fit into the ecosystem?
Yeah, well, I think that the algorithmic stablecoins are a very interesting and exciting idea, but I think that it still remains to be seen whether that approach is going to work, and it'll take many years before we'll be able to see them survive many different market conditions and different kinds of black swan events. And the reason why a lot of investors, especially institutional investors, have shown a preference for something like TrueUSD is because regardless of what happens on the markets, TrueUSD is always backed by a real US dollar. And so TrueUSD could be trading at 50 cents or at $2 on any given exchange, but at the end of the day, there's a real US dollar backing every TrueUSD, and there's a place you can go to get that US dollar out. So that oftentimes gives investors confidence, which they may not feel with algorithmic stablecoins or with stablecoins that are backed by volatile cryptocurrencies.
I see. And is a stablecoin that's backed by US dollars, is that still considered decentralized, given that decentralization is kind of one of the main benefits of the blockchain, but we're kind of tying this token to one government's particular representation of a currency?
Yeah, so it's tied to US dollars, but many algorithmic stablecoins are considering pegging to US dollars as well. But that's not that's just one product that we're building. We're planning on doing other currencies as well. And then people can make baskets out of those currencies if they want to make something that may be more stable than any of those currencies. But down the road, we're going to be doing commodities and other kinds of assets. And those will be, you could even make a coin which is a basket of goods that's meant to represent, kind of like the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. You could try to capture a basket that would, directly match inflation, so that your coin would always have the same spending power.
Okay, very helpful. Let's go to some audience questions here. So the first question from Allison Berriman is, why is TrueCoin better than Tether or TrueUSD?
Yeah, good question. Why is TrueCoin better than
So maybe
Tether?
You should define what is Tether first, so that everyone's up to speed, and what the problems that Tether have are.
Yeah. Okay, so Tether is let me check CoinMarketCap. Tether is one of the largest cryptocurrencies in the world. It is supposed to be backed by US dollars. Yeah, so it's right now ranked number 10 by market cap in the world. It's got a market capitalization of 2.6 billion, and it's supposed to be backed by US dollars. There are many concerns in the community that it may not be backed by US dollars, and that's partly because Tether they broke up their relationship with their auditor, and so there aren't regular audits or attestations showing that they hold the $2.6 billion that back the tethers. And the main difference with TrueUSD is that TrueUSD, it's not, we as a technology company are not holding the funds that back TrueUSD. We partner with banking and fiduciary partners, and these fiduciaries already manage billions of dollars of other people's money, and they're very certified and very regulated by the government, and they hold all of the money that backs TrueUSD. And we're going to use a similar model with all the products that we're producing. And additionally, we partner with Cohen & Co., which is a top accounting firm, and they do regular attestations on the funds that back TrueUSD. And you can find all those attestations on our blog. So
great, thank you.
That's the difference between our product and something like Tether.
Great. Next question from Eric Bollinger is, how are the escrow agents paid?
The escrow agents are paid by, well, we charge fees. We charge a small fee whenever TrueUSD is purchased or redeemed, and that helps to pay the escrow agents.
I see. Okay, great. And let's see here. Escrow agents are required to obtain state licenses. Do you plan on, or do you have escrow licenses?
No, we are not performing the role of the escrow agent. We partner with escrow agents, which are professional trust companies and professional fiduciaries, and they are highly licensed and highly regulated. And one of the things that makes our system very trustworthy is that we have the funds being held by these very qualified partners.
I see. Great. And then this next question is not quite on topic, but it was the #1 question that was on the list based on audience votes. Can you give us some insights as to how we can integrate new technologies like AI and machine learning with blockchain?
Wow. Okay. All right.
A little bit off topic, but yeah.
Sorry, AI and machine learning with blockchain?
Yeah. Hey, this is what the audience voted on. So.
We actually are going to be doing a lot of machine learning work at our company, and let me explain why. So we have 2 engineering teams at Trust Token. So one is the app team, which makes the application, the web application that I just showed you, and the other one is our market making team, and they provide liquidity to all of the TrueUSD markets, on the major exchanges where TrueUSD is listed. And so there's a lot of interesting machine learning algorithms that can be applied to problems like that, of how to optimally apply liquidity to these kinds of markets and keep TrueUSD as stable as possible.
I see. That's great. Thank you. Okay, so a couple questions from me here. So tell us, let's talk a little bit more about just what it's like to build this blockchain project. So, you're working with a team in San Francisco, and I'm sure you've encountered a number of technical challenges as you started to evolve this. What are some of the major technical challenges you've faced, and how have you overcome them so far? And what's on the horizon right now? Yeah.
So some of the technical challenges. So, all right. So one is on the market making team, there are some major technical challenges. So if you're familiar with what a Jane Street or a Jump Trading or a 2 Sigma do, so these are algorithmic prop shops, and they have algorithms which are trading 24/7, and this is what our market making team does, and they're trading on multiple different exchanges, and across different asset types, and they are the system you have to build is it's a fairly complex distributed system. So we've got something that's distributed across Heroku with RabbitMQ connecting all the different parts, and we're taking in price feeds from many different exchanges, and then we're computing what sort of trades we want to do, and then shooting those out to all the different exchanges that we trade on. And so that's a pretty complex system technically. And we've got an amazing engineers in that team, a couple guys from CMU. And then in addition to the market making side, we also have smart contracts that we have to produce. And as you know, smart contracts, once you launch them to the blockchain, those are irrevocable. And so there's a lot of technology that we put into our smart contracts. One is to make them upgradable. So we have a way that we have one version of TrueUSD, but we have a way such that we can launch a second version of TrueUSD, and then have this first smart contract delegate to the second one, so that all calls which are sent to the first one will get forwarded to the second one. And so this is a way to allow us to upgrade the actual smart contracts that are backing TrueUSD, and even though you can't ever replace a smart contract. And then inside those smart contracts, there are a bunch of security features around the minting and redemption of TrueUSD. So TrueUSD needs to be minted whenever someone, let's say they send in a $10,000 wire, then they need to have 10,000 new TrueUSDs minted for them. But that obviously has to be a very, very secure process, such that TrueUSD is never minted incorrectly or to the wrong address or to the wrong amount. And so the way that one of the security features that we built into our smart contract is that there's 2 different levels of keys that control the minting of TrueUSD. So one is called the owner key, and the owner key that's the most powerful key. It can do anything. It can immediately mint TrueUSD then there's the admin key, and the admin key is less powerful, and it can mint TrueUSD, but it works kind of like a time-locked safe, where it has to submit a request to mint a certain amount of TrueUSD to a certain address, and then 24 hours later, it can finalize that mint. And only at that point are the TrueUSDs actually minted. And so during those 24 hours, if anyone were to see that it was a fraudulent or incorrect mint, then that mint can be canceled, and the admin key could be revoked if the admin key were compromised. And so the way that this is used is that the admin key is used on a regular basis for minting of TrueUSD, and the owner key is almost never used. And so it can be kept at a very high level of security because it only has to be accessed in extremely rare circumstances. And there are additional features that we're building into the new version of the smart contracts that we're going to be releasing soon.
That's great. And is all this stuff open source, or do you keep some of it proprietary as well?
Well, everything that's in the TrueUSD smart contracts is completely open source, and that's also because it's on chain, and so you can see it all on chain. Now, in theory, we could put it on chain, but only in compiled form, like Ethereum bytecode, and so it would be very difficult for anyone to read. But part of what makes systems like this more trustworthy is that you can see the code that's running them, and you can see that it works the way that you'd expect. So all of the TrueUSD code is completely open source, and you can find it on our GitHub, which is github.com/trusttoken.
Mm-hmm. And did your team ever worry about someone else taking your innovations, forking them, and maybe having their own variant on what you're creating, given that you've open sourced all of it?
Well, that's not as much of a concern for our project as I think it is for many others, because if you have a cryptocurrency product, a project which is it's just pure code, right? Like an algorithmic stablecoin or like a decentralized exchange or something like that, where the whole thing is just code, and it's just a bunch of engineers. Then someone can just fork that code, and they would potentially have everything that you produced. But what's different about something like TrueUSD is that there's a very large real-world component to making a product like TrueUSD. We have fiduciary partners and banking partners and exchange partners, and we have accountants that we work with that do the attestations, and we have a compliance team that does the KYC AML, and there's a lot of real-world collaborations and work that goes into building something like TrueUSD and in all the other products that we're going to be producing. And so while the code is easy to clone, the real-world component is very difficult to replicate. And it's taken us a long time to pull together. But I think that's part of what makes what we're doing more special and more defensible.
Makes sense. And how do you think about the governance of this project? So are you guys kind of the benevolent dictators that are in charge of the project, or is the plan to kind of democratize the voting and the control over time? Like, how do you guys think about that governance going forward?
Yeah. So the way we think about governance is our goal is to make TrueUSD and our other products as trustworthy as they possibly can be. And so that involves splitting up responsibilities. So for example, all of the funds that back TrueUSD are being held by a third-party fiduciary, and we don't have any ability to access those funds. And also, we've put in place many different legal protections to protect the holders of TrueUSD from any sort of fraud that the fiduciaries or that we could commit. And so the system is designed such that those US dollars are being held on the behalf of those TrueUSD holders, and we are not legally allowed to do anything other than what I've described here of minting TrueUSD if and only if there's equivalent dollars in the account, and sending out money from the account if and only if the same number of TrueUSDs have been burned. Now there are some centralized powers that we have with TrueUSD that many other tokens don't. So for example, with TrueUSD, we have the ability to be able to blacklist any Ethereum address and prevent it from being able to send or receive TrueUSD. And part of the reason why that's important is that we want it to be the case that TrueUSD is the worst possible cryptocurrency that you could choose to use if you're a bad actor, like you're trying to money launder or you're using this for drug deals or anything like that. And so having some amount of centralized control helps us to be able to achieve that. And we need to be able to work with banks and with fiduciaries and with many other highly regulated companies. And so it's important that TrueUSD really is as compliant and as trustworthy as possible, and is respectful of U.S. law.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And what's on the horizon for the next set of products you guys are thinking about releasing? What comes after TrueUSD?
Yeah, so after TrueUSD comes other tokenized currencies. So True Euro and several major Asian currencies. And the goal there is that those tokenized currencies, they can act as the on-ramp and off-ramp for traders around the world. So just as an example, TrueUSD is listed on Binance. And if you right now want to move US dollars onto Binance, TrueUSD is one of the only ways to do it. Because you could trade your US dollars over the counter with someone for, let's say, Bitcoins, and then put your Bitcoins onto Binance. But then you're exposed to the volatility of Bitcoin, which might not be what you want. Maybe you want to invest in other cryptocurrencies on Binance. And so one of the best ways you could do it is you can just put your US dollars into TrueUSD, essentially tokenizing them. And then with TrueUSD, you can go onto Binance or onto any of the other exchanges where TrueUSD is listed and trade in and out of any currencies that you want. And so the same is true about True Euro and other currencies that we're going to be producing, is that they can act as valuable gateways from fiat to crypto and back and forth.
Mm-hmm. And for the other types of assets that are non-currencies, like houses and other real-world assets, are you planning to build that yourself internally, or are you thinking about that the community outside of your company will help to create those?
Yeah, so the roadmap towards those kind of assets is, first TrueUSD, then other currencies, then commodities later this year, and then starting in 2019 and beyond, doing assets that will be securities like tokenized real estate, equities, bonds, etc. And the ultimate goal would be if we can have such a streamlined tokenization process that we can move to a bring your own asset BYOA kind of model, where you could log in on our site and you could say, hey, I've got a $2 million rental property that I want to tokenize, and we'd say, okay, great, we'll spin up a trust automatically on the back end, and then send you the paperwork that you need to be able to put your asset into the trust, and we'll let you select from a list of fiduciaries, and then at the end of it, you'll end up with tokens in your Ethereum wallet that represent fractional ownership of this asset that you formerly owned in the normal way. So that would be the that would be the end goal that we'd like to be able to get to. But as it currently stands, producing each one of these tokenized products is a lot of work. And so we're looking right now for what are the tokenized products that we could make which would have the highest impact and would help the greatest number of users with even just 1, 2, or 3 products. And that's part of why we started with TrueUSD, is because the US dollar is just trusted around the world. And so allowing anyone to be able to tokenize their US dollars and put them into token form, that already helps a tremendous number of people and a lot of different
applications.
And
I would assume that with other types of assets, I would assume that there's more regulatory hoops you might have to jump through, right? In order to actually transfer an asset like a house or something like that. It seems like the laws that were generated for that, in the last 100 years or so or more, none of them had blockchain in mind. None of them had the idea of, let's make a proxy that represents this asset and allow that to be traded, right? So do you foresee that you're going to have some regulatory bumps to overcome, and have you started thinking about how you might do that going forward?
Yeah, good question. So it definitely is more complex. So currencies are the simplest, and then commodities are a bit more complex from a legal perspective, and then tokens that are securities, like tokenized real estate, equities, bonds, etc., those are the most complex from a legal perspective. Now from a legal standpoint, these tokens, it's not, it's a new technology, but from a legal standpoint, it's not really doing anything that new. It's the same as securitization. And just like if if a company IPOs and it issues public stock, right? It's actually a very similar perspective. And so the same laws that apply to securities apply to security tokens. And those are restrictions around when you can sell and trade those tokens and on what exchanges you can trade them. And that's part of why we are not actively producing those tokens at the moment, because there's still some amount of regulatory work that still needs to be figured out. And also there aren't yet exchanges that are live that are able to trade security tokens. And so right now, if you produce security tokens, there's almost nowhere where you could actually list those. So the market doesn't really exist for those kinds of products today, but we think that it will pretty soon, either 2019 or 2020. And at that point, we aim to be one of the most trusted sources for tokenized assets.
That's great. And so is it possible that the future that we're living into is a world where we'll be able to go to a website, click a button, enter some information, and then I'll actually own a house all electronically like that? Is that kind of in the foreseeable future, or is that too far away to conceive at this point?
Well, I think that would at least be a couple of years, but it's definitely foreseeable. And the vision that we have is, you could be an investor, living anywhere in the world, and you could purchase, $1 worth of a Manhattan rental property and $2 worth of your artist's favorite song. You could even imagine you go into a local store and you can buy a couple tokens which represent fractional ownership of that store. So fundamentally, when you fractionalize ownership, you get a lot of economic advantages. Just like how the last generation of companies like Uber and Airbnb, they fractionalized the usage of assets, like the usage of cars, the usage of houses. But when you fractionalize the ownership of assets, you also get a lot of additional benefits. And we're also excited about the applications for people being able to raise money more easily. So you could have an asset, whether it be a rental property or a small business or a piece of intellectual property that you own, and you could tokenize it and easily be able to sell that asset off to international investors that would want to purchase a piece of it, or local investors that want to purchase a piece of it. But if we can rebuild how ownership works and put it into token form, build something that is more secure, more trustworthy, and more open, then it can democratize opportunities a whole lot.
Very nice. Well, thank you. So let's go to the audience questions here before we wrap up here. I don't know if you can see the questions here, Rafael, on the bottom of the screen, but go ahead and open up the Ask a Question section, and you can see the audience questions. And by the way, Rafael, you can also ask the audience questions. So if there's anything you'd like to ask them, any polls you want to conduct, you can feel free to ask me, and I'll input those for you. Or you can go ahead and answer these questions.
Okay, well, I've got one like that. So if you could see one asset or type of asset tokenized, what asset would you be most interested in?
Okay, can we do that as a multiple choice answer? Because that's the only functionality we have here. Sure. Multiple choices would be, let's say, real estate, intellectual property, currencies, commodities. Okay. I'm entering it now. Okay, you're going to start to see results in real time in the polls section on the bottom.
Great.
So we've got one vote already for real estate. That's the current leader. 4 votes for real estate. Wow, so real estate is really what people are looking for here. I guess they like the idea. Okay. So this is how we're going to inform your product roadmap here, Rafael.
That's right.
Based on the democratic system here.
Well, real estate is also one of the most complex legally, probably because it's a security. But so let me answer a couple of these questions. I got to take off in just a couple of minutes. But so okay, the top questions. One is, how does Trust Token claim to be a stable token? So it's stable because at the end of the day, it's backed by $1, and you can create a new TrueUSD for $1, and you can redeem a TrueUSD for $1. And so and we also provide liquidity to the markets to help make TrueUSD more stable, and also to provide liquidity for traders. They can easily move in and out of TrueUSD. Then does TrueUSD plan to have a crypto equivalent credit card? This would be a huge step into mass adoption. We don't currently have a crypto equivalent credit card on the roadmap, but it is something that we could potentially do with TrueUSD in the future. Would it be required that the entire value of a true trust coin or ETH be greater than all assets that are tokenized? No, it's not required. So the question is like, is it required that like the value of all ethers or some other coin be greater than the value of all the assets that are tokenized? No, that's not the case. It is theoretically possible that you could have the market capitalization of all ether could be, let's say, $10 billion, and the market capitalization of all TrueUSD could be $100 billion. Now, TrueUSD would be relying upon the security properties of the Ethereum decentralized computer. And so if Ethereum was too cheap, then those security properties could be degraded because it wouldn't be worth enough to mine on the Ethereum blockchain. And so it wouldn't be, and so it'd be easier to attack because there'd be fewer miners. But, and so that's why, it is the case that Ethereum does need to have, some reasonable value for TrueUSD to be, highly secure. But it doesn't need to be greater than the market cap of TrueUSD or greater than the market cap of all the assets that are built on top. Okay, anyway, that's a couple of them. I got to take off in just a minute. Any last questions?
I think we're looking pretty good here. We really appreciate your time here, sitting with us today and educating us on Trust Token and TrueUSD. It's really an incredible vision for where this could all go in the future. I mean, I personally like all of the manual contracts that people are signing today and all that. It just really is cumbersome, and it's error prone, and it's costly. And there's a bunch of admins you have to, hire to deal with all of that, and there's legal fees and this and that. There's so much waste in the world that can be cut out with a system like that. So we're pretty inspired, and we hope that you're successful. And if the audience wants to get involved and build on this, what is their next step? How can they get involved?
Yeah, good question. So first of all, our team is actively hiring. We're a team of 18 based in San Francisco. We've got a beautiful office here in Soma, and we are hiring across the board, in engineering, in corporate development, on our recruiting team. And you can see all of our openings on trusttoken.com/careers. TrueUSD is also live on exchanges, and it's something you can buy today. And TrueUSD is also being built, is being integrated into more and more decentralized and centralized applications. And so if you want to use TrueUSD in something that you're building because it needs a stablecoin or it needs a crypto fiat on-ramp, feel free to do that. Those are applications that we're really excited to see, and feel free to drop us a line and just let us know what you're doing with it. That's pretty much it. Feel free to check out our site and leave us a note if you're interested in working together or being a partner. We'd love to hear from you.
Great. Well, thank you, Rafael. It was great hearing from you today, and thanks for educating us. Very, very cool vision. We appreciate your time. So thanks again. And audience, we're going to be back in just a second here. We'll be back with Lehman Baird, who is the co-founder and chief scientist of Hashgraph, and he's going to be teaching us about Byzantine fault tolerance, which is a very cool concept for how consensus is done on the blockchain. So if you've ever wondered about how consensus is actually done, this is the session to tune into. So thanks again. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Ed.